Hello, and thanks for watching. Since we're about to hear a short story from the Old Testament, let's begin with a prayer from the Old Testament. This is a prayer, slightly modified for us, which God instructed Moses to give. May the Lord bless us and keep us. May the Lord let his face shine upon us and be gracious to us. May the Lord look upon us kindly and give us peace. You can find that prayer in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. Now, on to the story of Jephthah. The message in this story is that God answers our prayers, but you better be careful about what you're praying for. Jephthah lived about 100 years or so before the time of King David, a time when Israel was ruled by judges, not kings. He grew up in a town called Mizpah, which is in Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. That made Jephthah illegitimate. His father had two other sons by his legal wife. These two half-brothers of Jephthah felt that they were the only ones who belonged in the family, and they basically drove him out of the house. However, at a later point, when Gilead became involved in a long war against the Ammonites, his brothers and their countrymen called him back because they knew he was a strong warrior and he was a military leader. He was fierce in combat. So he rose in the ranks in Gilead to become the leader of the army of Gilead. How did Jephthah win the war against the Ammonites? In the most intense part of the fighting, he made a promise to God, a serious promise, to offer a special sacrifice, a promise that was remembered in later years by Israelite women for the serious sacrifice it was. It was a promise made by Jephthah in all sincerity, but not a promise that God wanted to hear. Let me read it to you from the Bible. This is from Judges chapter 11, verses 31 to 36. Jephthah made a vow to Yahweh. If you deliver the Ammonites into my hands, then the first person to meet me from the door of my house, when I return in triumph from fighting the Ammonites, shall belong to Yahweh, and I will offer him up as a holocaust. Jephthah marched against the Ammonites to attack them, and Yahweh delivered them into his power. It was a very severe defeat, and the Ammonites were humbled before the Israelites. As Jephthah returned to his house at Mizpah, his daughter came out from it to meet him. She was dancing to the sounds of timbrels. This was his only child. Apart from her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and exclaimed, "Oh, my daughter, what sorrow you are bringing me! Must it be you, the cause of my ill fortune? I have given a promise to Yahweh, and I cannot unsay what I have said." What a tragedy. Jephthah won the war, but now he is stuck with his promise to offer his daughter in a holocaust to God. God did not ask Jephthah to make that sacrifice. Jephthah came up with that idea on his own. We can pause for a moment to ask whether there have ever been any human sacrifices demanded by God. Yeah, there's one. God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. However, this was a test of Abraham's faith. God stopped that sacrifice from happening. There was one other. Jesus was sacrificed on the cross. But that was a moment of God offering himself as a sacrifice. Many martyrs have died for their faith, but their deaths were executions, not sacrifices by the men who killed them. God has never demanded that one person kill another person out of love for him, God. Did God stop Jephthah from sacrificing his own daughter? No. A harsh lesson in being sure of what you ask for. What did Jephthah think would happen when he returned home from the war? Did he think it would be a servant who came out first to greet him? Would that have made a difference? Would God have been pleased by the death of a servant? Did God want or expect human sacrifice? The answer is no. Although, as the story is recorded in chapter 11 of Judges, Jephthah's daughter was obedient. She acknowledged that her father made a pledge to Yahweh and that he needed to keep it. She only asked for one thing, that she could go away to the woods for 2 months to celebrate her virginity. And so she did. After that, she returned, and Jephthah completed the sacrifice. Sad. We can add one more story about Jephthah. After defeating the Ammonites, he continued to rise, and he became one of the judges of Israel. Now, this was a role almost equivalent to that of a king at the time. He continued to lead an army. One of his later fights was to lead his Gileadites against the Ephraimites. He beat them solidly, and he succeeded in trapping their whole army around the river Jordan. There was no escape except to try to sneak through the Gileadite lines and try to disguise oneself as a soldier of Gilead. It was a good plan for the Ephraimites, since their soldiers looked very much like the Gilead soldiers, and they spoke the same language. The only real difference was in their accents, and that proved to be fatal. Here is the story about that, as told in Judges chapter 12, verses 4 to 6. Then Jephthah mustered all the men of Gilead and joined battle with Ephraim, and the men of Gilead routed Ephraim. Then Gilead cut Ephraim off from the fords of the Jordan, and whenever an Ephraimite fugitive said, "Let me cross," the men of Gilead asked him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he answered no, they said, "Then say Shibboleth." He would say Sibboleth, since he could not pronounce the word correctly. Thereupon they seized and slaughtered him by the fords of the Jordan. There perished in this way 42,000 men of Ephraim. Well, what an interesting way to determine who your enemy was, because he couldn't say a word. However, even though the Bible says that 42,000 Ephraimites were slaughtered because they couldn't say a particular word the right way, that might be an exaggerated number. It might. As we've noted in a few other talks in the Old Testament, sometimes the numbers can be exaggerated. At any rate, that's the story of Jephthah. And thank you so much for listening.